Some of you may or may not know, I just spent the last week with some of my friends from streaming. We've all been friends for years now at this point, so it was really nice to meet up and hack on something together. We were building a tower defense game live on stream. I'll link any of the related like vlog playlist, and I think the VODs at this point are now like members only, but I'll link what I can in the description. That whole experience gave me a really good opportunity to try some new products. They had some great sponsors. Fractal is like, they were the chairs that we were provided. And that's actually a company that my friend G has been working with, aka Study Time. If you don't follow her already, I will also link her in the description. Yet another friend from the Twitch sphere. She's been working with Fractal chairs for ages now, and I've never really tried one in person. This was my first experience with them, and they're actually so good. They're actually so good. Coming as like a Herman Miller Aeron girly, I actually found them more comfortable. I know you guys might have seen that in my previous like desk setup tour that I wasn't the most keen, like I wouldn't repurchase my Aeron. So actually the Fractal chairs are a very promising contender. That whole experience also allowed me to try Framework computers, both the laptop and desktop, and omarchy, which omarchy, I don't know how to pronounce it, so I'm just gonna alternate between the two. DHH, I hope that you can take this with a grain of salt because this is just one Linux girly's opinions and it is generally very positive. I wanna walk you guys through a little bit of like my thoughts on omarchy, whether I'd recommend it or whether I would not, and like who I believe it's made for and all of these different things. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Also, do let me know if you like this format. Your girl's always experimenting. I'm like, every single video is a little bit different. This one's more of just a cozy sit down little update video. Let me give you my thoughts on omarchy. So I've been using Linux since like 2018. So it's been a while. We're now in 2025, nearing the end of 2025. So it's been a long time. I've been around long enough to somehow break a lot of systems. Literally, at one point I was using Manjaro and my GPU died. I don't know if it was like Manjaro related because of like a driver failure, or if it was like my actual graphics card just like was dead, or because it was a pretty old computer. I've also had Ubuntu like forget how to do any DNS resolution. So I ended up having to actually reinstall the OS. I spent probably a full day, maybe two, trying to get that sorted out, and nothing was working. So I ended up just reinstalling an operating system, and that led me to Pop! OS. And I've been on Pop! OS for my stream PC since I think about 2021 or 2022. It works great. I'm on nixos for another machine that we might update soon because my T480 is so freaking slow. But I did get to try omarchy on a Framework laptop this past week, and I will say the experience was really good. I don't know if it's for the traditional Linux user. And I say that because if you've been using Linux for many, many years, you probably hold some very strong opinions on how you like things configured. Omarchy is very configurable, customizable, so you can do those things, but it is also marketed as something very opinionated. So there are a lot of things that you might want to change because they are very much geared towards the workflow or like key combinations, whatever that you might be used to from Mac OS, and or like are pretty specific to what DHH likes. For example, most of us Linux users probably are used to having super D mapped to Rofi because this historically used to be D menu and now it's Rofi if you're cool. So we're pretty used to that key combination, but instead in omarchy, that actually opens up lazy Docker. There's a couple other things like Super X opens up Twitter. We were jokingly calling these crimes of DHH, very playfully so. The program launcher is actually Super Space, which is very much similar to Spotlight Search on macOS. So I do think that like some of those key combinations felt super unintuitive to me as a Linux user. For what it's worth, even with my tiling window managers, I've never changed like that many things because I do still want to stay like adaptable, and I'm fine to just like, I don't have super strong opinions on how things need to be, but this is definitely like the most different from anything that I've tried. So yeah, in terms of the tiling window manager shortcuts, those were a bit of a spicy point. I will say the fact that Wi-Fi and Bluetooth were working seamlessly was pretty outstanding. I don't know about you, but Bluetooth and Wi-Fi working on a Linux machine, maybe it just depends on the machine. I don't think I've ever used Bluetooth with Linux because I can't get it working reliably or like skill issue. Dude, I don't recall. I think maybe I just also don't care about the chaos of wires. So maybe it's just me. So in short, there are some crimes of DHH, which is more so leaning towards the opinionated part of omarchy. The positives, it's incredibly easy to learn. I do really like that there is a shortcut. I believe it's super alt space that gives you a shortcut to all of the hotkeys, any of the manual that you need to reference, all of those kinds of things. I also will say, I'm so sorry. I do wish that the actual guide itself or even the documentation provided you with more context into more terminal heavy resources. I'm a big terminal gal, and it did feel kind of weird that it's opening up a web page to read docs instead of having it more similar to man pages, or even like in the documentation, it talks about some different commands that are available, including like fuzzy find and stuff like that. But there's no mention or reference to man pages, which I think is a big disservice to users. I think that there's a lot more room for growth in teaching users to fish, if that makes sense, teaching them to be more familiar with Linux instead of them solely relying on the fact that this thing is pre-built. I do think that the fact that this thing is pre-built and opinionated and it does just work out of the box and takes no time at all to install, I think that is a net positive for the Linux community. Again, the more users that we have using this free open source software, the more people there are to advocate on behalf of that software and to breathe more life into it. The more people you have in a project, the more people you have that can act as ambassadors and speak on behalf of the project. So hopefully that ends up being an outcome for this. I can also see omarchy being really popular paired with framework computers. The fact that you can bring your own distro, whatever you want, it's really broadening the reach for that. And I could see a lot of people who are maybe too nervous about the time investment that it would require for them to jump from Mac to Linux, that omarchy kind of bridges that gap and allows them to explore this amazing environment. So I do think in general, it is a net positive, and that the simplicity and the fact that it does just work as it works. And again, some of these things that kind of tie back to Mac OS and some of the behaviors that DHH is used to based on his experience as a Mac OS user probably lends itself more broadly to Mac users who want to try Linux. Yeah, it is pretty incredible how everything just works out of the box. So I will say, I think it's an amazing project. He's done a really good job with it. I do think that there's a bit of a missed opportunity in like teaching more about this kind of like fundamental Linux experience, because using omarchy versus using any other Linux distro is going to feel very different and probably a little weird, but like maybe that's fine. I don't know. Maybe it's fine. I'm just gonna say, if you are considering using omarchy and or Linux and or you're on Mac OS, but you want to move to Linux, whatever, just like, dude, just get good in the terminal. It is so powerful and the most game-changing transferable skill. Like, this is the way that you start to feel like you have superpowers working with computers. I think that is one of my favorite things about Linux specifically, even compared to Mac OS. So even though Mac OS, it does use ZSH as the default shell, as a contrast to what you experience when you're on Windows and it has to be a command or PowerShell, which is completely different syntax. What I love about Linux is that I can configure everything on the machine straight from my terminal. On Mac OS, you have to go to Systems Preferences and you have to change things up with a GUI. So a bit of a different level of control there. And I'm just going to say, if you are looking to get into Linux, I do think omarchy is a great place to jump off from. And you got to look into terminals and get good with terminals. And I can provide you with more information on that if you're interested. Just let me know in the comments. I got you. Okay. I've been working at a terminal tooling company. I worked there for nearly 4 years. So I've been deep in that rabbit hole. Okay. Oh, also DHH, Alt F11 instead of Super F for full screen is wild behavior. I don't know what that's from. I think someone mentioned that that was like a Firefox shortcut. One of your crimes. I've never spoken to DHH, so please, I hope that you take this all positively, because I think that the project is amazing. Omarchy is a pretty big point of contention online. It's been getting some heat. And this is mainly because people were considering omarchy bloated and uncustomizable, which I kind of get, but I also think that the existing Linux community is the most opinionated group that you could possibly target on the internet. They always are the ones who want lean and minimal software more than any other demographic of nerds that I've come across. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just something to like keep in mind that when you're seeing some of these arguments online like this, these are the people who are going to have the most extreme opinions on having like very minimal and lean software choices. Also, I don't think that omarchy is like super catering towards that audience, even though it's that audience that is like the first kind of wave of people that are going to probably take a look at omarchy. But I do think that this project is aimed mostly towards like macOS users, people with limited time who maybe don't want to be bothered trying to make everything work and they just want something that works smoothly out of the box. Then I think that omarchy is a really good option for that. So to recap, my biggest criticisms are the crimes of DHH, which is pretty much just a bunch of the different shortcuts, namely super D opening Docker instead of rofi or dmenu, which it's rofi by default in this one. Alt F11 for full screen instead of super F, like just some different things that I think come as defaults on a lot of different tiling window managers where they've changed the keys pretty drastically to be more oriented towards kind of a macOS workflow and or like web developer workflow. Another kind of criticism that I would have is that I would love to see this project point more users towards doing more in the terminal. That could either mean making your documentation available through the terminal, as in man pages, and or just bringing up some of these different resources that make Linux so great. I would like to see a little bit more in the documentation that's kind of teaching users how to fend for themselves and where to look for different information. The Arch Linux wiki is always a great reference. Man pages are a great reference. TLDR, like just different projects that you used when you were getting familiar with Linux along the way. It would probably be really helpful for other people if you share those resources, even whether it's in the manual or not. Otherwise, I think omarchy users are going to get too abstracted away from the details, and I want it to be kind of opt-in. Does that make sense, right? Like I don't want them to have to customize everything, but I want them to know where to look if they do want to customize things. Let me know your thoughts. It was brilliant using it for the week, and I'm super impressed with the framework build quality. I wasn't expecting it to be so nice because the case for the framework laptops is fully aluminum. It's lighter than my MacBook Pro, but very performant. The display is pretty good. It's hard to compete with Apple displays, obviously, compared to most other like non-Mac displays that I've come across. It's pretty dang good. And this was, I think the framework 13 was the one that I tried. I'm super impressed. I am probably gonna buy myself one and replace my T480 with the framework laptop. Because you know your girl loves yak shaving. Hopefully I can just swap out the drives, but we will see. I do want the nixos train to keep on rolling, so I will eventually figure out a new stream situation so that I can stream from my new Nix machine without having to worry about the reliability of OBS with Wayland, so be patient with me on that one. Also, my emacs config video, I do want to show you guys my emacs config. I feel like it's not perfect, but like, maybe that's fine. Maybe I just put a video out anyway and you guys can correct everything in my setup and then I can put out an updated video and delete the old one, pretend like it never existed. I don't know. You can do something like that. I've also got my configuration.nix actually live on my dot files if you are curious to see what that looks like. I'm still adding new things to it because I'm finding that there are different blockers I'm coming across in Wayland. And even Emacs, the build time now for when I rebuild Nix is pretty insane because I think it's building Emacs from source. I don't even know. There's some crazy stuff going on, but Emacs has taken up a lot of time in the build process with my Nix machine right now. But you know, what can I say? It's just all skill issues. I'll see you guys in the next video. I hope that you enjoyed this kind of chill update vibe. I'm trying to hopefully post more. So that's it. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.